Hello, I am Brooke Burton, and we are in the beautiful James Castle House, and I'm going to welcome you to the second Creators, Makers, and Doers Live, brought to us by the Boise City Department of Arts and History and West Elm Furniture downtown. I'm very happy to be here with Chris Binion, artist and painter, and I'm especially happy to be here with everyone who made it in person, as well as viewers that are tuning in online on our Facebook live stream. Welcome, everyone. The Creators, Makers, and Doers is also a blog where you can go online and read interviews and stories from artists like Chris told in their own words, and my favorite part, you can look at photographs of their beautiful studios and their workspaces, and you can see some of their artwork and see the kinds of things they collect, because many artists are collectors. And that reminds me, Chris, for people who are online and they wanted to Google you or look at your website, it is chrisbinionartist.com.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So, with Creators, Makers, and Doers, we love to talk about working artists, obsessing artists, sometimes meticulous artists. I'm not sure why meticulous came up when I thought of Chris. And we are going to, I'm going to have some questions prepared for Chris, and then towards the end I will open it up for those of you who are here, as well as anyone online. Please post your questions and your comments because we are listening. Chris is originally born in Louisiana, but grew up in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
He did not set out to be a painter or an artist, but I'm very glad that you took up painting. And he's got one of those stories about being a self-taught artist and having a gallery director happen upon his work. And then I'm going to let Chris tell that story, but it's one of those, like, you don't hear that happening very often, but it's very memorable. So, Chris, with that, you told me that you have kind of had very distinct stages in your life and careers.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you could tell us, because being a painter was not the first stage or career or the second one, so could you go through some of those?
Should I start at college or after that? I mean,
let's start where you feel like we should start.
Well, I spent 5 years undergraduate getting an English degree, which is totally useless. Well, at least it was for me. And then I went into the Army. When I got out, I got a master's degree in park administration, landscape architecture at Texas Tech University. And I did get a job from that. And I worked in Tulsa, Oklahoma as a city planner and park designer. Had a firm with 2 other friends, and did that for like 9 years, and then hit a wall. Just couldn't stand it anymore, and so moved to Boise and opened a kitchenware store in Hyde Park that morphed into Le Poulet Rouge restaurant. That morphed, or at least had a side shoot to Moxie Java. We started that, but all this time, I didn't know what I was going to be really, what I'd grow up and be, I guess. And I had started Le Poulet Rouge, and Dennis Ochi came into the restaurant, and I'd had one of my watercolors on the wall that I'd done. I'd just started taking watercolor in Tulsa, and had done some still lifes. And he said, "I bet you have 10 paintings underneath your bed." And I said, "Oh, I do." And so I said, "I want to see them," and he looked at them, and I was in a group show all of a sudden with him. So that's kind of how the art thing got started, although I didn't quit my day job. I believed.
So you had your artwork on the walls at the restaurant. What were you doing at the restaurant?
Well, it was everything. Washing dishes, cooking food, the whole thing. So it was very small. Started out carry out, but morphed into more just really, we're just open for lunch, but it was an all-day thing. So that was pretty time-consuming.
So you went from planning parks and landscape to cooking bean soup?
Black bean soup every day.
If I remember, so you described ending that career in the landscape as hitting a wall and just being done. Was that similar to your experience with the restaurant?
Yes. Well, yeah, one day I was making black bean soup, and I said, this is the last batch of black bean soup I'm making. And I was lucky enough to have a decent cook there that could kind of take over, and I would come in at noon to kind of make sure everything was going all right, or maybe even throw something together. But mainly I was able to start painting during the day, and I had a little studio in Old Boise in that building that the restaurant was in. And so I'd run up and down the stairs and make sure things were going. But basically I was upstairs trying to paint.
Well, was it difficult for you to just walk away like that is the last wall I'm going to make?
Oh yeah, I cried.
Oh,
I did.
You?
Yeah, I had a little tear, because I loved having the restaurant. I met wonderful people, and it was, I don't know, I love feeding people. It's still, to this day, it's my favorite thing to do in a way, because it's over quick and you clean it up and, you go on to the next thing. Whereas, if you're doing art, it's a little bit more involved than that.
And you can't just clean up a painting.
It's pretty hard to clean up. Well, the deed is done.
Well, so for those of you that maybe didn't catch, he talked about the gallery owner from Ochi Gallery in Sun Valley, or Ketchum.
Dennis.
Dennis. How was that? That was your first exhibit.
Yes.
Official
exhibit with a little name tag and prices.
Did you take a picture like, there's my name?
Of course not.
Okay.
That was before. That was way before phones and stuff.
True.
Yeah. So.
How was that received?
Very well. I believe we sold out, which was kind of nice.
See, that's what you have a gallery director walk into your restaurant when you're up to your
I know
elbows in soup. He offers you a show and it sells out, and
it is a fairy tale.
Yeah, that is a kind of a fairy tale. What kind of work was in that show?
There were still lifes, watercolors, and pretty much what I did for several years after that. I don't know how long I painted like that, and then one day I decided I'd had enough of that too. So I got out oil paints and tried that for a while, and then I went back to watercolor. So I'd kind of still bounce back and forth.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go back a little bit, because you also had mentioned to me that before going to college in English, you had an assumption in your head that you were going to be a doctor or a lawyer.
Oh, well, like all good sons, I felt like I needed to be, someone that would make money and make my father proud.
Yeah.
And I knew that being an artist was not one of those things, nor going into drama or, singing or any of those other things I kind of enjoyed doing. So it was, I tried. Well, I didn't try very hard, I guess. I became an English major 2 years into it after I'd tried pre-med. And
oh, so you did start?
Oh, I totally
Good
bombed
for you.
with chemistry, and I did pretty good in biology because I could memorize things, but chemistry, things like that had math involved, it was not good. So
you went for it.
I went for it, but that's what took me 5 years to get out.
I know that you had told me that both of your parents had passed away since, but was there a point during your artist career that they were to see some of that, or?
Oh, yes. My mother was a big fan of, and Daddy was too. I think that he really was very proud of me. He was very proud that when we had the restaurant, and that was pretty good. He thought that was pretty cool.
Did he come? Because he didn't live in Boise.
No, lived in Shreveport.
But he came and ate at your restaurant.
And I think he was very amazed because he showed up at lunch and there was a line out the door, and it was kind of nice.
That is really nice. And you had this idea that it had to be some high achieving position, but.
And Mother was more tuned into art than Daddy was, but I think he came to see the value in that too, and to because Mother was able to come up. Daddy had died, but come up for one of my shows, and that was really nice. So
that is really nice. Well, I'm just impressed by your ability to pick up a new skill and just go through the lifespan of that, from being self-taught in an area and then making a business and then throwing it all down?
Well, I think that, I always thought of myself as this kind of the Renaissance man, not in any kind of glorified way, but I just couldn't make up my mind what I wanted to do, or I wanted to try all of it.
You wanted to do all of it.
I mean, I'm in the master chorale now, and now I want to be a singer, but of course that's like
so close
not
to
gonna happen.
This is what you said. You said, I couldn't go into drama or singing, which I loved, and then I just had the vision of you're going to throw down your paintbrush.
No.
But how close are you to going back and doing the other things like the drama and the singing?
Oh, not very. I had my brush with the drama in high school, and it was, I know where my strengths are at this stage anyway.
Okay. Well, another thing you talked about when we were describing wanting to make people proud is people asking you for advice if they want to go into art, and what kinds of things that you would tell people.
Well, I felt like I was really lucky in that I did have businesses to to support me, and a great partner that supported me too. And so when high school kids would come in and say, show me their work and want to know what I thought and if should they go into art, and I really couldn't in good conscience say yes, because it's tough to be an artist, especially in Boise, and unless you're just really, really good and you've got that drive that is really, really strong, which I don't have either. I really don't. I've had it easy, I guess, and it's just you need to have a day job. And I had a day job. I had several day jobs. I had 3 day jobs. And I still have a day job, really. So it's not, and so for me it's a luxury, which I can afford to change mediums. I can afford to do something far out or take a chance. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, even some of my contemporaries, can't do that because they've got a family and kids to support. And so it's, but I tell people, if they ask my advice, I would say, if you can possibly get a degree that would, support you somehow with a regular job, and then try painting on the side and then work into it. That's my suggestion anyway, but that's from my experience. And I don't have that, I guess maybe it's fire in the stomach or whatever that would burning just to get out there and do it.
Well, we talked about how maybe some people with that kind of burning drive could live off of their art alone and not eat or drink, and they might stay up all night. How would you feel about being a starving artist?
No, I do like my creature comforts, and no, I don't think I would produce very good art being that. I think there would be so much panic and fear running through it that I couldn't enjoy it at all.
I think the word security came up.
Yeah.
Enjoying security.
I do. I think if I didn't have that security of it just nothing would go right. I just can't even imagine. And I'm not saying that's for everyone. I also am saying I'm very lucky and very fortunate. A lot of people have had a role in that too. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought that this would be a good time for you to describe your work and describe your aesthetic and maybe your subject matter, which these 3 pieces I asked Chris to bring, and they are a little bit out of the general genre because it's not quite a still life.
Well, totally. This is what happens when someone pays a visit to your studio.
I might have done that.
You might have done that. My aesthetic. When I started out painting and I started doing watercolors, I really realized that I love beautiful things, and I love creating things that I think of as beautiful. And so objects have always fascinated me. I've always been attuned to things in my environment, and I just started painting them, and then I saw that I could also tell a story with those objects, that we all collect stuff or have stuff in our homes, but for me it's, I was intrigued by little things that I collected, just, everything from seashells to a silver pitcher, or maybe it's something that somebody had given me. But I started really looking at them, and I thought, well, maybe these watercolors are about looking closely and looking deeply at things, and really appreciating those things, even though they're maybe are not valuable money-wise, but they are valuable in sentiment or shape or whatever reason. And so that really carried me quite a long ways with my work. And I've since kind of started, I got my head up out of the studio a little bit and started looking at landscapes and things, and so I've kind of branched into that. In fact, if you look at my website, you wonder, is this the same person? Because the paintings that are on there is a show I had several years ago, and they're watercolor washes, and they're just color. And so, but color is very important to me too, and the use of color was interesting to me, how it could be jarring or it could be calming, and I liked playing with that. I also was fortunate enough to do some three-dimensional work. I did a large sculptural piece with Dwayne Carver that's in the Center on the Grove. I did
When you walk in the doors,
you walk in the lobby, no one sees it, but you walk in the lobby, and if you turn around and look up, it's all the way across.
Turn around and look up.
Or come in the other door, but it's something you have to get in there to see. I did the piece at the co-op, and I've had the opportunity to design the chapel furniture and stained glass and things at two of the hospitals here at St. Al's. So
the St. Al's in Boise, and then the St. Al's in
Nampa.
They have a chapel, and it's like I've seen the photographs, and it's like walking into an installation. And
Well,
I think you said that was...
It is.
It is. But the people who are coming there for the other purpose might not think of it as an installation of artwork, but I think it would look very calming.
Well, it's my use of my art to create a calming, restful, quiet place for people. And being in Catholic hospitals, and that was also my religion too, it was, to try to express that, but at the same time make it a space that any denomination would feel comfortable too. So those were really great experiences, and I really enjoyed kind of using, I guess, my talent to do things like that too, that far removed from the studio. And
well, and just the breadth of disciplines that you've been working in are so many. But I know you have been doing oil painting, but I kind of want to go back to the story of how you got to watercolor.
Well, I was living in Tulsa and working with I had two other partners, and we had a landscape architecture and planning firm. And at night, I was just like, I've got to do something different. And there was Philbrook Art Center was like 3 blocks away from where I lived, and it was an old Phillips home that started Phillips 66. It was this great mansion, beautiful lawns and everything, but it was an art center, and there were classes taught. And there's a big pottery department, and so I started taking ceramics. And one day I was doing something, I heard this clattering upstairs, and I went upstairs, and Pat Gordon, who is a watercolorist, was teaching watercolor, and he was wearing clogs and smoking a cigarette out in the hall because he couldn't smoke, I guess, in the studio at the time. But and I just, I knew what Pat had done, and when I realized who it was, and he was teaching classes, I totally dropped the pottery and moved to last pot. I'm a watercolorist now, and started taking watercolor classes from him. And so I some of the paintings that were in that first show with Ochi, I started in Tulsa, actually. So
you'd mentioned that the watercolor paper, that big sheet of white paper, was kind of a challenge in a different way than a canvas. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Well, when I was starting out, to buy a sheet, Pat Gordon told us, you buy Arches watercolor paper, Winsor Newton watercolors, and you get Sable brushes. And you start out with that.
The nicest stuff.
Don't do the cheap stuff. You'll be fighting it the whole time. And so when I started, doing bigger pieces, I started buying Arches 300-pound deckled edge watercolor paper, which I don't know at the time what it was. It was probably $10 a sheet. I don't know, something like that. Well, it's a lot if you're going to mess up, So it's intimidating. So you had to be really careful, I guess. And but there was something about the paper, the deckled edge, that watermark. Just the paper in itself was art to me. In fact, I used it in several paintings that it became a background piece, or this white paper against the white paper, and I would paint in the deckled edge and look like it was floating off the paper. And I just was terribly in love with my medium. And the fact that watercolors, you could wash your hands with water afterwards or clean up your brush with water was really a nice, I liked the neatness of that it wasn't too messy.
Well, then the difference between like watercolor and something like oil is when you're painting with oil and you change your mind, then you put on more paint and you change it and you can layer it over and over again. Can you do that with watercolor?
It's I guess you can, but it's really a one-shot deal. You have to be, at least the way I was painting, I had to do very detailed drawings of almost like a paint by number kind of drawing, so I knew where things went, and then it was just kind of fill in the blank after that. I think that's why I enjoyed doing those washes that I did a couple of years ago. It was just like, I'd never really used a big wash in a painting, the still lifes, and so doing just big washes was really like, oh, can I do one of these even? And so it was fun to do that. But it's a medium that is, I really had to study it. I had to learn about the pigments and the light fastness and what's transparent and what's opaque. And as I worked with it, it became more and more, fascinating that how complex it was. It wasn't just a little prang 7-color watercolor set. I don't know how many tubes of watercolor.
Well, were there times when something you made a line, you're like, there goes my $10 paper, or mistakes?
I figured out ways of correcting some mistakes. I did have some disasters that I thought would be, like the end of the world. I started painting this piece that was really very complicated. It was this wicker plant stand, and there was this glass piece with fruit in it and little things in this background. I had iris, I think they were Dutch iris, that were blooming quicker than I could paint them. And then the background had this chintz pattern that I'd bought this yard of fabric. And I'd just about gotten it finished. And it was laying on I paint watercolor flat. And it was laying on my board, and I went to bed, and we had a cat at the time, and the cat decided to walk across it and knocked over the water, and it sort of pooled in there. So the next morning I was faced with that, but because
you said end of the world, you felt like that was the end.
That was the end of the world. I was never going to paint again. No, no, it was like I had wasted a note, but I put too much time into this piece to just abandon it. So I changed the background to this black chintz instead of a white background or a cream color chintz, and by using some gouache and black, which is much more a solid color, and making it look like it was lighter and darker, made it into this chintz fabric that really it turned out to be a better painting, actually, thanks to the kitty cat.
Well, there have been times, particularly I was looking at your exhibit, history at CTA, Architects, Collateral Beauty. It's really cool work. I'm going to describe it. He took inspiration from paintings by old masters, like, give me an example.
Albrecht Dürer, Gainsborough, Michelangelo.
Right, and Chris, in his vision, zoomed in on areas of fabric, pooling, drapery, and he painted the drapery, and they're really beautiful. But I listened to an interview of you saying that maybe 2 weeks before that was going up, you were having terrible second thoughts, like maybe I should repaint. Like, what kind of doubts do you go through when making artwork?
Well, I shouldn't say all artists, but I think a lot of artists go through this angst about, is anybody gonna get it? I mean, I think, well, at least for me, I paint to have some sort of communication with the viewer. And I mean, I want them to maybe not understand, but at least respond somehow to my work. And this was sort of intellectual or whatever, that I was getting back into my art history days. And but it was also really about my love of fabric and the still life setup and the use of that in my work. Really, it's been in a lot of my work. It was just, it was kind of like my attempt to be abstract, perhaps, too, that this was not of really anything. It was color, but it was painted realistically or in the style of the artist. It was also a show that was like 3 years in the making, or 4, because I did a couple of pieces and then thought, well, no one's going to get this, and quit doing it and just dropped it. And then 2 years ago picked it up and said, no, I think I have to do this, and kind of get it out of my system.
You're pretty good at following your gut.
Well, yeah.
Is there times when, I think you described that you would go to bed looking at a painting and then you'd see it differently in the morning?
Oh, yeah. I have felt many times that, especially when I'm having like a little roadblock, or I'm working on something, it's just like, oh, it's not really working, or is it? And come back the next day into the studio, and it looks like, I say the fairies have been working on it, because I didn't think it looked like that when I left. And it's just, I think a lot of artists will say they have to kind of get away from the work and then come back with fresh eyes. But it's always been an amazing thing to me that, what I'm doing, it's not channeling, but you almost feel like you are, because I don't think that my gifts are any better than anybody else's. It's I know there's better painters in this room, in fact, than me, and I don't know, it just sort of, sometimes it works, then you go to bed, and then you come back and maybe it doesn't work. But the days that you do come back and it's different, it really feels good, like maybe you're tuned into something.
That's cool. Well, you've mentioned using art as a way to communicate with the viewer. Do you, in your mind, have a viewer that you think of, or a type of person, or someone in your life, or someone in the past, or are you speaking to other artists?
I have to say no to all of those. I don't know. I kind of just, if I'm working on a piece, I'm not really thinking of the next show, because there may not be a show. In fact, if I start a painting, that doesn't mean there's going to be a series of work similar to that would, in my mind, make an exhibition. So a lot of work, I have, well, you saw, I have drawers full of work that's never seen the light of day, that probably never will. So it's not like I'm painting for an audience at all. I'm really just painting for me. And there's this hope that if I paint one or two that kind of are looking alike, that maybe it'll turn into 7 or 8 or maybe 10 that might end up being a possibility of an exhibition, or maybe morphing into something else. There's always that hope, but that doesn't mean that happens every time.
Right.
And sometimes it's a start-stop thing too. I might go back to something and then it turns into something, or it doesn't. There's a lot of dead ends in my work, I think. And I think that's why I've kind of changed so much during my career, too, is because the dead ends forced me to start something else, and then like stopping watercolor and then coming back to watercolor. And
Right. Well, could you tell us about this work?
well, this was, I don't know why, I got kind of, I know it had happened. John had bought an icon, and it's, one of these beautiful gold things. It was just really beautiful that we have in our home. And I started thinking about icons. We'd gone up to St. Gertrude's, and there's an icon school over there every year up there, and they have some icons. And I'd seen some certainly in photographs and I think other museum shows and things. And I thought, oh, that's kind of nice, but I'm not going to be painting a saint, in a certain way. No one's going to tell me how to do that. So but anyway, I did buy gold leaf and learned that you can waste a lot of gold leaf if you're not careful. And so I started doing these little panels of just gold leaf, trying to figure out how to do gold leaf. And I ended up doing about 7 or 8 pieces like this. I don't know, I was just taken by some photographs I'd seen in some magazines and newspapers of horrible things happening in the world. So this is a drive-by shooting. This is an earthquake in Iran, and this was refugees, starving in the Congo. And I thought, well, I would make kind of icons of these events, and just to have something to put on it. And unfortunately, the paintings turned out to be great, but the gold leaf is not very good, and so I never could really show them because the technique of gold leaf changed and was different on every one of them, so it never was really a body of work necessarily. But
which I didn't notice, by the way. I looked at all of them together. I thought they looked great.
But I have them hanging in my studio just because I love them and they speak to me. And I do think they're very strong pieces. They're just...
Well, they're inspired by I can't think of the word now, the icons.
Mm-hmm. But it's also, it was a different, it kind of harkens to my isolating objects. And I mean, it's the figure as an object maybe, but it's, I do a lot of my work is, it's a blank background or white paper and just the object. For years, that was what I did, all I did, floating in that white spot. Mm-hmm.
Why do you think you do that?
I like the object. I don't know, I probably want to be a minimalist artist, and but
is it calming?
Yeah, it's calming, but it's also I like just saying what I have to say in the object, because the object says it for me. That's what I'm painting, and that it doesn't need a background necessarily. And I liked, taking that background away and just having. I did a series of just old barns. We went up to northern Idaho, and there were these great barns up there, Coeur d'Alene, and all the Palouse and everything. And I did a whole series of these barns, but there's no landscape. They're just the barns, and where the hill comes down, you can covering part of the edge of it. You can imagine the hill, but it's just white paper, and
it's that negative space.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, you talked earlier about looking closely. And if you isolate something and take away its background, then without that context, you're forcing that focus.
Well, and then you know that something terrible's happened, but you really don't know what. If you had the rest of the village in rock and rubble behind you, you'd kind of know what that is. And I don't know, they could be anywhere in a way, but it's the human condition, though.
Well, it's interesting you've paralleled that with the icons, which are maybe more uplifting, and this is kind of bringing you back down.
Well, or I think it says something. I mean, human suffering can be awfully, well, that's what icons, a lot of them are, is that these saints that have suffered and, been martyrs or whatever. But right today at this moment, there are these people that are suffering and, trying to save their family or overcome some horrible thing that's happening in their lives that they really maybe can't even help. Tragedy, yeah. So these are the tragedies.
Do you think any of your objects could have been said to have some form of tragedy to them?
Possibly. I mean, I did do a series once of the joyful mysteries, getting into my Catholic stuff. They were still lifes, but they were objects that kind of, to me, in my mind, and very abstractly, I think, too, told the series of the 5 joyful mysteries. And I think the same thing could have been done if I'd stuck with that one, too, is to, look at the sorrowful mysteries, perhaps, too. I think objects say something, they must say something to people. Because otherwise we wouldn't have things in our lives. We would just all live in white rooms or blue rooms or whatever, but nothing else. A cup would be the same cup that everybody has all over the world or something.
But
we don't.
We don't.
We like tchotchkes and we like collections and we like our mother's china and we like, stuff like that.
Yeah, we do. Well, I have one more question for you, and then I'm going to open it up to questions from people here.
The hard ones? Okay.
Yeah. And Chris, maybe when you answer the questions, if you could restate kind of what the question was, since I'm not wearing a microphone.
All right.
But my question is, I had asked Chris, since he kind of delayed going into the arts, if he had any regrets about that. And you said something about believing in a divine order and that things happened the way they were supposed to happen. Well,
I do believe that I think I'm in Boise because of, it's not like I'm saying that, some sort of divine order is working through me. That's a little pretentious, but
right.
I think that things happen, or at least in my life, they seem to have happened in some sort of order or something. And I know that's a really gift, because I know there are a lot of people that are tossed and turned by chance and happenstance and horrible things that happen. And I have lived a charmed life. In fact, I've always thought that if we have multiple lives, this is my vacation life. That it's been very, very sweet. And but the way things have evolved, there's been some pain, but it's not been unbearable. It's been character forming, perhaps, but it's been a great run. I mean, I'm 72, and I feel like if I died tomorrow, I'd have had a super life. I'm good with that. I really am.
That's pretty awesome.
So.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I would like to open it up to questions from people here about some of Chris's work, or maybe plans for the future, which we didn't really touch on.
Brooke, I have just one little comment to the.
Oh, good. I'm glad John is piping up to comment.
Chris, there's a photograph of your Catholic grade school classroom in your art studio that I think is rather telling of what would occur in the future. Could you describe that classroom photo?
John's mentioned a photograph that I have some photographs up in my studio, and one is a picture of my class at St. Anne's School in Midland, Texas, and it was vocation week. And just about everybody's in either a nun or a priest outfit, of course, at St. Anne's School. But there was a guy, Joe Huff is dressed as a farmer, and Bruce Bartlett was a scientist. But I am standing there in my artist outfit. I have a beret on, a smock, and so, hey. And a palette. So it.
And what age was that classroom?
4th grade, probably. Mm-hmm. So, but by then I'd been introduced to the seductive smell of oil paint. My mother had taken me to an art class. Linseed oil, and it was some barracks, I don't know, in Midland, Texas. And I walked into the room, and where I was going to be taking oil painting, and that smell hit me, and it was like cocaine. It was like I was hooked, I have to say. So it's kind of, it's not like it's a late life. Suddenly I'm an artist. But I got the shot of linseed oil and turpentine. So yeah. Oh, come on.
Katie's got a question.
Chris, how would you say that you are influenced by your friends, your work? You're influenced by your friends, artists or otherwise?
How am I influenced by my friends' art or other friends otherwise? I think I am. I was at least, I would say, inspired. I'm always inspired by my friends that are artists. When 9 of us started Enso Artspace a few years ago, I probably got more out of it than anybody in the group, because I was so inspired to be with these really good artists that were friends, and having the pressure of having to do shows all the time and do work.
Produce work.
But I'm more, I think, at least I'd like to think that I am more influenced by their, the awe of their talent, and I want to be like that, or their work ethic, that I'd like to be like that. I'd like to show up every day and really actually get some work done every day. So I hope that I'm not, I try not to be influenced. If somebody's using gold leaf, maybe I might get interested in gold leaf, but it's not like I'm trying to copy their gold leaf. Or if somebody is doing, I don't know, that's a tricky one, because I think that, I know we all kind of get this information, and certainly as an artist, I'm looking at photographs and stuff like that, but the inspiration is more of a inspiration in here, I think, rather than, I want to do work like that. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's more of a spur in the or something like that to make me try to be better. Hi.
How did you develop your career as an artist between the time you had the exhibit in Sun Valley and now?
How did I develop my career? Well, I had the show, actually the Ochi show was here in Boise, and it was a group show, but, and I did have work at Dennis's, Ochi's gallery for a while, but I just kept painting, and then and also I was the restaurant was in Old Boise, and at the time there was a space in the front of that building at 6th and Main where Jimmy John's is now that was vacant, and I talked to Joan Carley. I said, can I do a show there, because I had, of course, work that I needed to put up, and she said sure, and I put up this show, and during while it was up, and it was nicely attended actually, Jackie Christ came in and saw it, and she, almost like fell down the floor because it was Jackie Christ, because she's from LA, and but we immediately became best friends, and I think that's where I guess was the beginning of the arc of my career. She took me under her wing, and it was a wonderful relationship, because she was not only a great gallerist and a great friend, but she was a great critic of my work too, which I really needed, because artists have trouble self-criticizing, and she took that as something that she would do. So, and I think it really helped my work.
What was it you told me that she would look at something and if she didn't?
Oh, she was nice about it, very nice about it. But
she would say, like, this is you and this is...
Yeah, she knew what, or at least in her mind, and part of this guiding me, I think, was that she really liked when I was quirky and detailed, and so she really encouraged that. She would say, well, this, is this really you? I mean, she'd ask the right questions or say the right things in a very diplomatic, kind way. But also, I knew when I left there kind of what to do. Or in fact, the show that you mentioned at the CTA Architects, I took every one of those 13 pieces in to show her because I wanted to see what she thought. And she didn't say one negative thing, but when I left there, I knew I had to repaint every one of them, or at least do something on every one of them, because there was this standard that she had in her mind that she knew that I could reach, and so I needed to reach that. So that was, I think, answering your questions.
That's similar to, you were saying you were inspired by friends because you saw a standard of maybe their ethic, or that you wanted to reach that. So that's been really important for you.
Well, going to shows, going to museums, just the shows that Jackie had when she had her gallery, there was this level of, just fine work that it was real inspiring to try to achieve that, or not to copy that, but just to bring my work up to that level.
Yeah. We have time for just a couple more questions.
Yes.
You mentioned a couple of times that you go through that process of not knowing when something's going to become a body of work. How many paintings for you does it have to be where you can say, okay?
What makes a body, to me, a body of work? I think I picture a gallery or a room somewhere, and I think, well, let's see. It depends on what size I'm working with, I guess. Like if it's something like this, I would think probably if I get to about 6 or 7, then I think, okay, I can get a few more, and this might make a show. I have a stack of little watercolors about this big, about this tall, that is a show that's all wrapped up, ready to go. But so it kind of depends on the size, but something, 5 or 6 will tell me that, oh yeah, this is.
That's when you kind of relax.
And then I sometimes hit the wall too, like the other idea doesn't come, or maybe it's several years later it comes. So it kind of varies, I guess, but that's kind of it.
Correct. You talked about your great joy of feeding people. When you think of that in terms of your artwork, are there any stories from your life or moments where you were sharing your visual art where you really felt that same feeling of being at the head of a grand banquet? You knew that you had really made people happy.
I think the instance that comes to mind is when I did the chapel at the St. Al's here in Boise, and I'd finished installing that stained glass window, and the furniture was moved in, and I adjusted the lights. I remember the walking out of there after it was all done and cleaned and everything, and really feeling like I had created a space that would give comfort and peace to people, and really, in my mind, affect their being in that hospital with, a dying person or a loved one or whatever, and to go there and just sit there and be quiet. I didn't even think about them saying Mass every Wednesday, but it was what people would get out of that space when they came in there by themselves maybe in a bad spot, that they could be lifted up somehow. And that felt really good.
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
One more?
What objects are inspiring your work right now, and how did you come across them?
Okay. Well, right now I am working on actually 2 commissions, which I swore I would never do commissions, but
Why?
why? Because people have, I think people that want a commission have their painting in your painting in their mind or whatever, and sometimes you just don't gee-haw. But anyway, so I'm working on those, which it's not really a good one's a garden scene, which I've never painted a garden scene before, and the other one is a piece similar to the one that's at the Center on the Grove. It's the wood piece with gold leaf and silver leaf and stuff. So it's really not what I'd normally do. And it's a good thing they came up because I was kind of at a dry spot. I'm waiting for the next, hit. So, and hopefully there will be one, because sometimes, you just sort of go along piddling around, working crossword puzzles and cleaning, well, not even cleaning up, but, and then and then it hits. So I'm not, these won't be turn into anything more than what they are, I'm sure. But, I complained to the universe I didn't have anything to do. So
you're waiting for the thing to drop.
I'm waiting for the thing to drop. So I don't know what it'll be. So, but it'll be something, I'm sure. I think as long as I can sit in that chair and tape a paintbrush in my hand, I'll keep doing it.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for sharing about your process, about your history, and thanks to all of you who came out. And I want to bring attention to the Creators, Makers, and Doers Volume 1 zine, published by the Boise City Department of Arts and History, where they've got excerpts and photographs published from the interviews of each of the 12 artists that we are hosting here in the James Castle House this year. You can buy this for $6.50 in the James Castle store. But next month, we are going to welcome painter Randy Van Dyke in this chair, in Chris's chair. So come back for that, Thursday, March 28th, 6 p.m. Randy happens to be over there in the corner. Thanks for coming, Randy. And join us again next time here or online. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.